It was early morning at San Francisco International Airport. The sun had just begun to rise, casting golden light through the large glass windows of Terminal 3. Travelers bustled about, dragging suitcases behind them, checking their phones for gate updates or sipping coffee while waiting to board their flights. Among the crowd was Marcus King, a tall man with sharp features and an air of quiet confidence. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, he stood out among the sea of casual travelers. His leather briefcase gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he walked toward Gate 27. Marcus wasn't just another passenger. At 42 years old, he was the founder and CEO of Nexus Tech, one of the most innovative companies in Silicon Valley. Nexus Tech specialized in advanced artificial intelligence systems used by industries ranging from healthcare to aviation. Marcus had spent years building his company from scratch, often working late nights and weekends to turn his vision into reality. Now, his name carried weight, not only in business circles but also in government and military sectors where his technology played a crucial role. Yet despite his success, Marcus still encountered moments that reminded him of how far society had yet to go. He reached the gate and handed his boarding pass to the agent stationed there. The young woman scanned it quickly before frowning slightly. She glanced up at Marcus, then back down at her screen. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "there seems to be an issue with your reservation." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What kind of issue?" he asked calmly, though a flicker of irritation crossed his face. He'd purchased a first-class ticket weeks ago and double-checked everything the night before. There shouldn't have been any problems. The agent looked uncomfortable. "According to our records, your seat has been reassigned to economy class," she explained, avoiding eye contact. "I'm not sure why. It might be a system error." "A system error?" Marcus repeated slowly, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. He leaned closer to the counter, placing both hands on its surface. "Let me clarify something. I paid for a first-class ticket. I didn't book economy. Are you telling me that because of some error, I'm expected to give up my seat?" The agent shifted nervously, glancing over her shoulder as if seeking help from someone else. "Sir, I understand this is frustrating, but unfortunately, we can't override the system right now. If you'd like, I can offer you a voucher for future travel." "That's not the point," Marcus interrupted, his tone firm but controlled. "This isn't about compensation. It's about fairness. You sold me a ticket for first class and now you're trying to renege on that agreement without explanation." By this time, a small group of passengers had gathered nearby, curious about the commotion. One of them was Emily Carter, a freelance journalist traveling to New York for a conference. She noticed the tension immediately. Standing near the edge of the crowd, she observed how the airline staff seemed unusually flustered when dealing with Marcus. Something about the situation struck her as odd. Why would a first-class ticket suddenly disappear, and why did the agent seem so reluctant to resolve the issue? Emily edged closer, pretending to scroll through her phone while listening intently. She caught snippets of the conversation between Marcus and the agent. When Marcus mentioned that he had confirmed his booking multiple times, the agent replied defensively, "Sometimes technical issues happen. We apologize for the inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" Marcus echoed, his voice rising slightly. "Do you know how much work I've missed because of delays caused by these so-called technical issues? Do you think people like me don't deserve basic respect?" His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. People around him exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded sympathetically, while others whispered to each other. Emily felt a pang of anger on Marcus's behalf. She had seen enough stories about racial profiling and discrimination to recognize what might be happening here. But instead of jumping in, she decided to wait and see how things unfolded. The agent, clearly overwhelmed, called over a supervisor. A middle-aged man with thinning hair approached the counter, exuding false charm. "Good morning, sir," he said with a forced smile. "I hear there's been a misunderstanding. Let's see if we can sort this out." "There's no misunderstanding," Marcus replied coolly. "You're refusing to honor my ticket. That's all there is to it." The supervisor frowned, flipping through papers on his clipboard. After a moment, he sighed dramatically. "Mr. King, I assure you, this is not personal. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, we've had to make adjustments to seating arrangements. Your original seat is no longer available." "Unforeseen circumstances?" Marcus shot back. "What exactly does that mean? Did someone important show up unexpectedly? Someone who deserves my seat more than I do?" The supervisor hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the directness of the question. Before he could respond, Marcus pulled out his phone. "Fine," he said, his expression darkening. "If you won't fix this, I'll take care of it myself." Emily watched as Marcus dialed a number, his fingers moving swiftly across the screen. Whoever he was calling must have been significant, judging by the way the supervisor's demeanor changed instantly. Gone was the fake smile. Instead, he looked nervous, almost fearful. The agent, too, seemed frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. "General Hayes," Marcus said after a pause, speaking softly enough that only those closest to him could hear. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I need to bring something to your attention." As Marcus spoke, Emily noticed the growing unease among the airline staff. The supervisor whispered urgently to the agent, who shook her head frantically. Passengers continued to murmur among themselves, speculating about what was going on. Was Marcus really that powerful? Who was General Hayes, and why did his name send shivers down the spines of the people working at the gate? Marcus ended the call after a few minutes, tucking his phone back into his pocket. He turned to the supervisor, his gaze unwavering. "You have 10 minutes to resolve this," he said evenly. "Otherwise, I'll let General Hayes handle it directly." The supervisor paled visibly. "Yes, Mr. King," he stammered. "We'll get this sorted out right away." But Marcus wasn't satisfied. 10 minutes, he repeated firmly. Then, without another word, he stepped aside, folding his arms across his chest as he waited. Emily couldn't help but admire his composure. Most people would have lost their temper by now. But Marcus remained calm and collected, even in the face of blatant disrespect. Whatever leverage he held over the airline, it was clear that they were taking him seriously. As the minutes ticked by, Emily found herself wondering, how far would Marcus go to prove his point? And what secrets lay beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary airport incident? The scene at Gate 27 simmered with tension, drawing in curious onlookers and sparking whispers of intrigue. For Marcus, this was more than just a denied boarding. It was a test of power, justice, and resilience. Little did anyone know the events unfolding here would ripple far beyond the confines of the terminal, setting the stage for something much bigger. The clock on the wall at Gate 27 ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. Marcus stood off to the side, his posture relaxed yet commanding. His calm demeanor masked the storm brewing beneath the surface. Passengers who had been watching the scene unfold continued to whisper among themselves, their curiosity growing with every passing moment. Emily Carter lingered nearby, her journalist instincts kicking into high gear. She couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. Meanwhile, the airline staff scrambled behind the scenes. The supervisor, whose name tag read Greg, was on the phone with someone higher up in the company. His voice was low and urgent, but snippets of the conversation drifted out. "Yes, sir, he mentioned General Hayes." "No, I don't know what that means exactly, but it sounds serious. What do you want me to do?" Greg's face was pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Whatever Marcus had said during his call clearly carried weight, more weight than anyone expected. Back at the counter, the young agent who had initially denied Marcus boarding stared nervously at her computer screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as if she were afraid to make the wrong move. Another employee rushed over, whispering frantically in her ear before disappearing again. It was chaos, but a controlled kind. One where everyone seemed to be tiptoeing around an invisible line they didn't dare cross. Marcus glanced at his watch, then looked directly at Greg. 5 minutes left, he said evenly. His tone was calm, almost casual, but there was an edge to it that made the supervisor flinch. Greg hung up his phone and approached Marcus with forced confidence. "Mr. King," he began, adjusting his tie unnecessarily, "we're doing everything. We can to resolve this issue. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. Let's be clear. This isn't about inconvenience. This is about respect. Or rather, the lack of it. You refused to honor my ticket based on some vague excuse. Now suddenly you're scrambling because of one phone call. Why is that? Greg opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated. Instead, he gestured toward the gate area. If you'd like, we can offer you priority boarding now. Your original seat may not be available, but we can ensure you're seated comfortably in first class. Marcus shook his head slowly. That's not good enough. I want answers. Who decided to reassign my seat? And why wasn't I informed beforehand? The supervisor shifted uncomfortably. It appears there was a technical error, sir. These things happen occasionally. Don't insult my intelligence, Marcus interrupted sharply. A technical error doesn't explain why I'm being singled out. Do you treat all your passengers this way? Or am I special because of the color of my skin? His words silenced the room. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, some nodding in agreement while others looked away awkwardly. Even Greg seemed taken aback, though whether it was genuine shock or feigned ignorance was hard to tell. Emily stepped closer, unable to resist the pull of the unfolding drama. She noticed how Marcus's presence dominated the space, not through aggression but through sheer authority. There was no yelling, no theatrics, just quiet, unshakable resolve. It was clear that Marcus knew exactly how to play this situation, and he wasn't backing down until he got what he wanted. Greg cleared, his throat clearly desperate to regain control. Mr. King, please understand that we value all our customers equally. If there has been any misunderstanding, we will address it immediately. Perhaps we could discuss this further in private? No, Marcus replied firmly. Whatever needs, to be said, you can say it here. Everyone deserves to hear it. The supervisor hesitated, glancing around at the growing crowd. More passengers had gathered, drawn by the tension and the promise of drama. Some recorded the exchange on their phones, while others simply watched intently. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation. Finally, Greg relented. Very. Well, Mr. King, let me assure you that your seat in first class will be reinstated. We'll also provide a formal apology and compensation for the trouble caused. Marcus crossed his arms. Compensation? That's not what I'm asking for. I want accountability. I want to know who made this decision and why. And I want assurance that this won't happen again. Not just to me, but to anyone else who might find themselves in a similar situation. Greg looked visibly relieved at the opportunity to comply. Of course, Mr. King. We'll launch an internal investigation right away. In the meantime, please allow us to escort you to your seat. Before Marcus could respond, another man appeared, at the gate, a sharply dressed executive with a polished smile and an air of authority. He introduced himself as Richard Bennett, the airline's regional manager. Mr. King, I apologize for the oversight, he said smoothly, extending a hand. Please let me personally assist you with boarding. Marcus studied him for a moment before shaking his hand briefly. I appreciate the gesture, Mr. Bennett, but actions speak louder than words. I expect results, not empty promises. Richard nodded solemnly. Understood. Rest assured, we take this matter very seriously. As the two men spoke, Emily edged closer to eavesdrop. She caught fragments of their conversation, including references to partnerships and critical systems. Something about the way Richard spoke suggested that Marcus held more leverage than anyone realized. Was it related to the mysterious General Hayes? And what did Nexus Tech have to do with this airline? Emily's thoughts were interrupted when Marcus turned to address the crowd. For those of you who witnessed this incident, thank you for your patience. Unfortunately, discrimination is still a reality many people face daily. Today I chose to stand my ground, not just for myself but for everyone who deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. His words drew murmurs of approval from the audience. Several passengers clapped softly, while others nodded in agreement. Emily felt a surge of admiration for Marcus. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was using this moment to highlight a broader issue. Whether intentional or not, he had become a symbol of resistance against systemic injustice. With the situation seemingly resolved, Marcus finally boarded the plane, escorted by Richard and a team of attentive staff. As he disappeared down the jet bridge, the crowd began to disperse. But Emily stayed behind, her mind racing with questions. Who was Marcus King, really? And what secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of this ordinary flight? Back at the gate, Greg and his colleagues breathed, a collective sigh of relief. For now the crisis had been averted. But deep down, they knew this was only the beginning. Whatever power Marcus wielded, and whoever General Hayes was, their actions today would have consequences far beyond San Francisco International Airport. The plane prepared for takeoff. Marcus settled into his first-class seat, gazing out the window at the bustling runway below. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. This victory was minor compared to the larger battles ahead, but it was a step in the right direction. Change wouldn't come overnight, but moments like these reminded him why the fight was worth it. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Emily Carter was already planning her next move. Inspired by what she had witnessed, she decided to dig deeper into the story. Little did she know, her investigation would uncover truths that extended far beyond the confines of an airport terminal, and bring her face to face with forces she never imagined. The flight to New York was smooth, but Marcus King's mind was anything but calm. Sitting in his first-class seat, he stared out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, his thoughts racing. The incident at the gate had been resolved. For now. But Marcus knew it wasn't over. The look on the supervisor's face when he mentioned General Hayes still lingered in his memory. It was fear, plain and simple. Fear of consequences far greater than a delayed flight or an angry passenger. Across the aisle, Emily Carter sat in her economy seat, typing furiously on her laptop. She had booked the cheapest ticket available, assuming she'd spend most of the journey sleeping. But after witnessing what happened at the gate, sleep was the last thing on her mind. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she jotted down notes about the confrontation between Marcus and the airline staff. Phrases like technical error, discrimination, and General Hayes stood out in bold letters on her screen. Something about the situation didn't add up, and Emily was determined to find out why. As the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, Marcus pulled out his phone. He opened an encrypted messaging app and typed a brief update to General Hayes. Situation contained for now. We'll follow up once I land. Within seconds, a response appeared. Good work. Be careful. This could escalate quickly. Marcus sighed and tucked his phone back into his pocket. He leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment. He hated these kinds of situations. They reminded him of how much work still needed to be done, not just in the aviation industry, but across society as a whole. Nexus Tech had given him wealth, power, and influence. But those things came with a price. Every time he used them, it felt like he was playing a game, one where the stakes were higher than anyone else realized. Back in economy, Emily glanced toward the first-class cabin. Through the curtain separating the two sections, she caught a glimpse of Marcus sitting quietly, lost in thought. There was something magnetic about him, something that went beyond his polished appearance or commanding presence. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but it intrigued her. Who was this man, really? And why did his name seem to carry so much weight? Her curiosity deepened when she noticed a notification pop up on her phone. A quick online search for Marcus King. Nexus Tech revealed more than she expected. Articles praised him as a visionary leader who had revolutionized artificial intelligence. Interviews highlighted his commitment to using technology for good, from improving healthcare systems to enhancing transportation safety. But one detail stood out above the rest. Nexus Tech's AI software powered critical operations for several major airlines, including the very carrier they were flying on. Emily's eyes widened as the pieces began to fall into place. That must have been why the airline staff panicked when Marcus mentioned General Hayes. Whatever Nexus Tech provided, it was clearly essential to their business. Without it, they might face severe disruptions, or worse. This wasn't just about a denied boarding. It was about leverage. Marcus had used his company's importance to force accountability, and the airline knew it couldn't afford to lose him. As the plane descended into JFK Airport, Emily made a decision. She would write an article about the incident, not just to expose the discrimination Marcus faced, but to explore the broader implications of corporate power and systemic inequality. If done right, it could spark a national conversation. But first, she needed more information. She needed to talk to Marcus directly. By the time they landed, Marcus had already disembarked and disappeared into the crowd. Emily spotted him briefly, near baggage claim, surrounded by a small entourage of assistants and security personnel. He moved with purpose, his steps brisk and deliberate. She considered approaching him then, but decided against it. Interrupting him in such a public setting would likely get her nowhere. Instead, she trailed behind discreetly, hoping to learn more about his next move. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. As Marcus exited the terminal, he paused to take a call. Standing near a row of taxis, he spoke softly into his phone, his expression unreadable. Emily pretended to scroll through her emails while listening intently. Fragments of his conversation drifted toward her. "Yes, I'll meet you there," Marcus said. "Make sure everything is ready. We don't have much time." He ended the call and signaled for a black SUV waiting nearby. Before climbing inside, he glanced around the area, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. For a split second, his gaze landed on Emily. She froze, unsure if he recognized her, but then he turned away, sliding into the vehicle without another word. Emily watched as the SUV pulled away, its tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Wherever Marcus was headed, it was clear that his day was far from over. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily flagged down a taxi and instructed the driver to follow the SUV at a safe distance. The SUV eventually arrived at a sleek office building in Midtown Manhattan. Emily paid her fare and stepped out onto the sidewalk, keeping her distance as Marcus entered the lobby. She approached the reception desk cautiously, flashing her press credentials. "Hi, I'm writing a piece on Marcus King," she said with a friendly smile. "Do you know if he's meeting anyone here today?" The receptionist hesitated, clearly torn between professionalism and curiosity. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't disclose private information about our guests." Emily nodded understandingly. "Of course, I completely understand. Thanks anyway." She retreated to a nearby cafe, ordering a coffee while strategizing her next move. After a few minutes, inspiration struck. Pulling out her laptop, she drafted an email addressed to Marcus's assistant. Subject line: "Request for comment on recent incident." In the body, she briefly explained her role as a journalist and expressed interest in discussing the events at SFO Airport. She hit send, knowing it was a long shot but worth trying. To her surprise, she received a reply within the hour. The message was short and formal. "Mr. King is currently unavailable but appreciates your inquiry. Please provide your contact information and someone will reach out shortly." Emily smiled to herself. Progress. However small, it was a step, a word. Meanwhile, inside the office building, Marcus sat across from Richard Bennett, the regional manager who had intervened at the gate. Joining them was a team of executives, all looking tense and uneasy. Marcus wasted no time getting to the point. "I assume you've reviewed my company's contract with your airline," he began, leaning forward slightly. "You're aware that Nexus Tech provides the AI systems responsible for managing your fleet's operational efficiency, correct?" Richard nodded nervously. "Yes, Mr. King. We understand the importance of your technology." "Good," Marcus replied coolly. "Then you also understand that any disruption to those systems could result in significant delays and potentially ground your entire fleet." The room fell silent. One of the executives cleared his throat. "Mr. King, we deeply regret the incident at SFO. It was never our intention to offend you or jeopardize our partnership. We're prepared to offer compensation." "This isn't about money," Marcus interrupted sharply. "It's about respect. Respect for me, for my company, and for the countless others who face discrimination every day. What happened at the gate wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern you need to address immediately. The executives exchanged worried glances. They knew Marcus wasn't bluffing. If he followed through on his threat to disable their systems, the fallout would be catastrophic. Not only would it cost them millions in lost revenue, but it would also damage their reputation irreparably. "What do you propose?" Richard asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. "First, I want a public apology, not just to me but to everyone affected by discriminatory practices within your airline. Second, I expect a detailed plan outlining how you intend to prevent similar incidents in the future. Third, I want quarterly updates on your progress. If I'm not satisfied, I'll reconsider our partnership." The executives nodded fervently, eager to comply. They knew they had no choice. Marcus rose from his seat, signaling the end of the meeting. "I'll give you 48 hours to draft a statement. After that, I'll decide whether to escalate this matter further." As Marcus left the room, he felt a mix of satisfaction and frustration. He had achieved what he set out to do, but it wasn't enough. True change required more than threats and ultimatums. It required action, from individuals, corporations, and society as a whole. Outside, Emily waited patiently, watching as Marcus exited the building. She approached him cautiously, extending her hand. "Mr. King, I'm Emily Carter. I was on your flight earlier today. May I have a moment of your time?" Marcus studied her for a moment before nodding. Briefly. Emily smiled, sensing an opening. "Thank you. I'd like to hear your side of the story. What happened today wasn't just about you. It's a reflection of larger issues we need to address. I believe sharing your experience could inspire meaningful change." Marcus considered her words carefully. Then, with a faint smile, he replied, "Let's talk." And just like that, Emily found herself stepping into a world far bigger than she imagined, a world where technology, power, and justice intersected in ways that would challenge everything she thought she knew. Marcus King sat across from Emily Carter in a quiet corner of a midtown cafe. The hum of conversations and the clinking of coffee cups filled the air, but neither of them paid much attention. Marcus had agreed to speak with her, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe it was because she seemed genuinely curious, or maybe it was because he felt a responsibility to use this moment to make a difference. Either way, he decided to trust her. For now. Emily opened her notebook and clicked her pen nervously. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. King," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I know your time is valuable." Marcus nodded slightly. "Call me Marcus, and you're welcome. I'll answer what I can, but there are some things I can't discuss." "Understood," Emily replied. She took a deep breath, then dove into her first question. "What happened at the airport today? It wasn't just about a denied boarding, was it?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "No, it wasn't. It was about respect, or the lack of it. When they tried to reassign my seat without explanation, it wasn't just an oversight. It was a reflection of how people like me are treated every day." Emily scribbled notes quickly, her pen moving furiously across the page. "Do you think it was intentional? Or was it really just a technical error, as they claimed?" Marcus let out a dry laugh. "Let's be honest, these so-called technical errors don't happen randomly. They target certain groups, people who look like me, sound like me, or come from backgrounds like mine. It's subtle, but it's there. And when you call them out on it, they panic because they know they've been caught." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "That's what stood out to me at the gate. The staff acted like they were dealing with something bigger than a simple seating issue. Was that because of your company, Nexus Tech?" Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Nexus Tech plays a role in many industries, including aviation. Our AI systems help manage operations, improve efficiency, and ensure safety. Without them, airlines would face serious challenges. But I didn't threaten to shut anything down just to get my way. I did it to make a point." And what point is that? Emily asked, leaning forward slightly. That power shouldn't be abused, Marcus replied firmly. I have leverage, yes, but I use it responsibly. If companies like yours depend on my technology, then they need to treat their customers fairly. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Emily paused, letting his words sink in. So you're saying this wasn't personal? It was about accountability? Exactly, Marcus said. Accountability is key. If we don't hold people responsible for their actions, nothing changes. Discrimination doesn't stop unless we confront it head-on. Their conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Emily asking probing questions and Marcus answering thoughtfully. He shared stories about other incidents he'd faced throughout his career, times when he'd been underestimated, dismissed, or outright ignored because of the color of his skin. Each story painted a picture of resilience and determination, showing how far he'd come despite the obstacles in his path. As they wrapped up their discussion, Emily thanked him again. This has been incredibly insightful, Marcus. I think your story could inspire others to stand up against injustice. Do you mind if I include parts of our conversation in my article? Marcus considered her request for a moment before nodding. Go ahead. Just remember, this isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. If sharing my experience helps even one person realize they deserve better, then it's worth it. Later that evening, Emily returned to her hotel room and began writing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she crafted a detailed account of the events at the airport and her conversation with Marcus. She titled the piece When Power Meets Principle, a CEO's Stand Against Discrimination. As she wrote, she focused not only on the incident itself but also on its broader implications. She highlighted how systemic racism persisted in industries like aviation and how individuals like Marcus were using their influence to drive change. By midnight, the draft was complete. Exhausted but satisfied, Emily sent the article to her editor with a note. This could be big. Let's run it tomorrow morning. The next day, the article went live. Within hours, it went viral. Social media platforms lit up with reactions from readers across the country. Some praised Marcus for standing his ground, while others criticized him for wielding his power too aggressively. Regardless of the opinions, one thing was clear. People were talking. At Nexus Tech headquarters, in San Francisco, Marcus received dozens of messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers alike. Many expressed gratitude for his courage, while others offered support in various forms. One email stood out in particular. It was from General Hayes, the military official Marcus had spoken to during the incident at the gate. You've started something important, the message read. Be prepared for pushback, but stay firm. Your voice matters. Marcus smiled faintly as he read the note. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he couldn't turn back now. Meanwhile, the airline scrambled to contain the fallout. Their public relations team issued a statement apologizing for the incident and promising reforms to prevent similar occurrences in the future. They announced plans to implement diversity training programs and review their policies regarding customer service and discrimination. While some praised the move, others dismissed it as damage control. Back in New York, Emily watched the developments unfold with a mix of pride and apprehension. Her article had sparked a national conversation, but she wondered whether it would lead to real change, or simply fade away as another headline in the endless news cycle. She decided to follow up with Marcus a few days later. When she called him, he sounded busy but willing to talk. I saw your article, he said. It's making waves. I hope it does more than that, Emily replied. I want it to inspire action, not just words. So do I, Marcus said. But change takes time. We've planted the seed. Now we have to nurture it. Over the next several weeks, Emily stayed in touch with Marcus, documenting the ongoing impact of his actions. She interviewed passengers who had witnessed the incident, employees within the airline industry, and experts on racial bias and corporate accountability. What emerged was a comprehensive picture of the challenges faced by marginalized communities. and the potential for progress when individuals refuse to stay silent. One afternoon, as Emily worked on the final draft of her expanded investigation, she received a surprising invitation. Nexus Tech was hosting a conference on ethics and technology in Silicon Valley, and Marcus wanted her to attend as a guest speaker. "Your perspective adds value," he explained. "People need to hear your side of the story." Emily accepted without hesitation. She knew this was an opportunity to amplify her message and reach an even wider audience. On the day of the conference, Emily stood nervously backstage as Marcus introduced her to the crowd. "Emily Carter's work has shed light on issues that affect us all," he said. "Tonight she'll share insights that remind us of our responsibility to create a fairer, more inclusive world." As Emily stepped onto the stage, she felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about telling a story, it was about igniting a movement. Looking out at the sea of faces, she began to speak. "When I met Marcus King," she started, "I saw someone who used his power not for selfish gain but for justice. His actions reminded me that each of us has a role to play in shaping the future. Whether you're a CEO, a journalist, or simply someone who believes in equality, your voice matters. Together we can build a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." The audience erupted in applause, and Emily felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. For the first time in years, she truly believed that change was possible, if enough people dared to demand it. As the conference ended, Marcus approached Emily with a warm smile. "You did great," he said. "Keep pushing, the fight's not over yet." Emily nodded, knowing he was right. The journey was far from finished, but every step brought them closer to a brighter future. And with voices like hers and Marcus's leading the charge, there was hope that someday the world might finally listen. The weeks following the conference were a whirlwind for both Marcus King and Emily Carter. Emily's article had ignited a firestorm of public discourse, with debates raging across social media, news outlets, and even corporate boardrooms. People from all walks of life weighed in, some praising Marcus for his bold stand against discrimination, others criticizing him for leveraging his power in what they saw as an intimidating way. But no matter the opinion, one thing was undeniable. The conversation about systemic bias and accountability had been brought to the forefront. For Marcus, the attention was both gratifying and exhausting. On one hand, he was proud that his actions had sparked meaningful dialogue. On the other hand, he found himself constantly defending his decisions to skeptical critics. "I didn't do this for fame or recognition," he told Emily during one of their frequent phone calls. "I did it because someone needed to say something, and I happened to be in a position to make people listen." Emily understood where he was coming from. She'd faced her own share of backlash since publishing her piece. Some accused her of sensationalizing the incident, while others questioned whether she was exploiting Marcus's story for personal gain. But like Marcus, she refused to back down. "If telling the truth makes me unpopular, so be it," she said firmly. "This isn't about us. It's about making things better for everyone." As the days turned into weeks, the ripple effects of their efforts began to spread. The airline involved in the incident wasn't the only company feeling the heat. Other carriers started reviewing their policies, fearful of becoming the next target of public outrage. Passengers shared their own experiences of discrimination, flooding social media with stories that painted a sobering picture of inequality within the aviation industry. Journalists picked up on these accounts, amplifying them through investigative reports and opinion pieces. It seemed that every corner of society was being forced to confront uncomfortable truths. One morning, Marcus received an email from General Hayes. Attached was a confidential document outlining proposed reforms within the Department of Transportation. "Your actions have prompted federal agencies to take notice," Hayes wrote. "We're working on legislation to address discriminatory practices in transportation sectors. You've inspired more than you realize." Marcus read the message several times, letting its weight sink in. For years he'd fought battles big and small, often wondering if his efforts made any real difference. Now, seeing tangible results gave him renewed hope. Still, He knew the fight was far from over. Laws could be passed, but changing hearts and minds required something deeper, something more enduring. Meanwhile, Emily continued her work, diving deeper into the systemic issues plaguing the aviation industry. Her research led her to interview flight attendants, pilots, ground staff, and passengers from diverse backgrounds. What she discovered shocked her. Discrimination wasn't limited to seating arrangements or boarding procedures. It permeated nearly every aspect of air travel, from racially profiling passengers at security checkpoints to offering subpar service based on appearance. The problem ran deep. One particularly striking interview was with a flight attendant named Lisa, who had worked for a major carrier for over a decade. "You learn to pick your battles," Lisa explained, her voice heavy with resignation. "Sometimes you see things happen, things that aren't right, but you don't say anything because you're afraid of losing your job. It eats at you, though. Every time you stay silent, you feel like you're complicit." Emily listened intently, her heart breaking for Lisa and countless others like her. She realized that solving these problems wouldn't be easy. It would require not just policy changes, but cultural shifts within organizations. Employees needed to feel empowered to speak out without fear of retaliation. Leaders needed to prioritize inclusivity and equity above profits, and customers needed to hold companies accountable when they fell short. Determined to keep the momentum going, Emily pitched a follow-up article to her editor. This time, she wanted to focus on solutions, ways individuals and organizations could combat discrimination in meaningful ways. Her editor loved the idea and gave her the green light to proceed. As Emily worked on her new piece, Marcus received another invitation, one that surprised him. A coalition of civil rights groups had organized a summit in Washington, D.C., aimed at addressing racial bias in corporate America. They asked Marcus to deliver the keynote speech. At first, he hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his favorite activity, especially when the topic was so personal. But after much thought, he agreed. If sharing his experience could help drive change, he owed it to himself and to others to step up. The day of the summit arrived, and Marcus stood backstage, rehearsing his remarks one last time. When he finally walked onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause. Looking out at the sea of faces, he felt a mix of nerves and determination. Clearing his throat, he began to speak. Discrimination isn't just a word. It's a lived reality for millions of people around the world, he said, his voice steady and commanding. It's the look you get when you walk into a room. It's the assumption that you don't belong. It's the subtle ways systems are designed to exclude you. And it's the frustration of knowing that despite your best efforts, some people will never see you as an equal. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. Then he continued. But here's the thing. We have the power to change that. Each of us has a role to play. Whether it's calling out injustice, advocating for reform, or simply treating others with kindness and respect. Together, we can create a world where everyone has a fair shot at success. The crowd erupted in applause once again, standing to their feet in a show of solidarity. Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel hopeful, not just for himself, but for future generations. After the summit, Marcus and Emily reconnected over coffee. Both were drained but exhilarated by the progress they'd witnessed. "It feels like we're actually making a difference," Emily said, sipping her latte. "But there's still so much work to do." Marcus nodded in agreement. Change doesn't happen overnight, but every step forward is worth celebrating. They spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming ideas for collaboration. Marcus suggested partnering with Emily to develop educational programs for businesses, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Emily loved the idea and immediately began drafting proposals. By the time they parted ways, they had laid the groundwork for a partnership that promised to amplify their impact. Back in New York, Emily finalized her follow-up article, titled, "From Outrage to Action, How We Can Combat Discrimination." In it, she outlined practical steps individuals and organizations could take to foster inclusivity, from implementing bias training to creating safe spaces for open dialogue. She also highlighted success stories, companies and leaders who had embraced change and seen positive results. When the article went live, it resonated deeply with readers. Many reached out to thank Emily for providing actionable advice rather than dwelling solely on the problem. Others pledged to implement her suggestions in their own workplaces. Once again, the conversation gained traction, proving that people were hungry for solutions. As the months passed, Marcus and Emily remained committed to their mission. They traveled together to conferences, workshops, and community events, spreading their message of accountability and empowerment. Along the way, they inspired countless others to join the fight against discrimination. Their partnership became a symbol of what could be achieved when determination met opportunity. One evening, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Emily turned to Marcus with a smile. "Do you ever stop and think about how far we've come?" she asked. Marcus chuckled softly. "All the time. But I also remind myself that we're just getting started." Emily nodded, gazing out at the city lights. "Well, whatever comes next, I'm glad we're doing it together." And with that, they sat in comfortable silence, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road to equality was long and winding, but with voices like theirs leading the charge, there was hope that someday the world might finally listen and act. Months had passed since the incident at San Francisco International Airport, but its impact lingered like ripples spreading across a pond. For Marcus King, life had settled into a rhythm of purpose and reflection. His days were filled with meetings, speeches, and collaborations aimed at fostering equality and accountability. Yet amidst the whirlwind of activity, he often found himself pausing to consider how far they'd come and how much farther they still had to go. One crisp autumn evening, Marcus sat on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, gazing out at the glittering lights of San Francisco. The city buzzed below him, alive with energy and possibility. He thought about the countless people who had reached out to thank him for standing up against discrimination. Their messages reminded him that his actions had resonated beyond the confines of an airport terminal. They had sparked a movement. At the same time, Emily Carter was wrapping up her latest project in New York. Her investigative work had evolved from exposing injustices to proposing actionable solutions. She had partnered with organizations to create training programs focused on diversity and inclusion, helping businesses rethink their practices. Though the workload was demanding, she felt fulfilled knowing her efforts were making a tangible difference. That night, as Marcus scrolled through emails on his phone, one caught his attention. It was from a young entrepreneur named Daniel, who wrote to express gratitude for Marcus's leadership. "Your story inspired me to keep pushing forward," Daniel said. "I'm starting my own tech company, and I want to build it with fairness and respect at its core. Thank you for showing me that it's possible." Marcus smiled faintly as he read the message. Moments like these reminded him why he kept fighting. Change wasn't always visible or immediate, but it happened. One person, one decision, one act of courage at a time. The following week, Marcus flew to Los Angeles to attend a gala honoring trailblazers in technology and civil rights. As he walked into the grand ballroom, he spotted Emily mingling with guests near the stage. She waved when she saw him, and they exchanged warm greetings before settling into conversation. "You've been busy," Marcus said, nodding toward the stack of papers Emily carried under her arm. "What's next for you?" Emily grinned. "I'm working on a book, a deeper dive into systemic bias and how we can dismantle it. I've interviewed dozens of experts, including some of your colleagues at Nexus Tech. You might even make an appearance." Marcus raised an eyebrow playfully. "Just don't make me sound too heroic. I'm just doing what anyone in my position should do." Emily laughed softly. "Trust me, I'll keep it real. But seriously, Marcus, you've become a symbol of hope for so many people. Don't underestimate the power of representation." Before Marcus could respond, the event organizer stepped onto the stage to introduce the honorees. As Marcus accepted his award, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the tense standoff at the airport gate to the global conversations it had sparked, every moment had shaped him in ways he never anticipated. In his acceptance, speech, Marcus spoke candidly about the challenges of using privilege responsibly. Power isn't something to hoard, it's something to share, he said. When we use our influence to lift others up, we create opportunities for everyone to succeed. That's the kind of world I want to live in. And if my story inspires even one person to join this fight, then it's worth it. The audience erupted in applause, and Marcus returned to his seat feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Back in New York, Emily continued working on her book, pouring her heart into every chapter. She wove together stories of resilience and determination, highlighting individuals who had overcome adversity to drive change. One section focused on Marcus, not just as a CEO, but as a human being navigating a complex world. She wanted readers to see him not as a distant figure, but as someone relatable, someone whose struggles mirrored their own. As the months went by, Emily's manuscript took shape, and publishers began expressing interest. When the book finally hit shelves 6 months later, it became an instant bestseller. Readers praised its honesty and practical advice, calling it a roadmap for creating a more inclusive society. At a book signing event in Chicago, Emily spotted Marcus in the crowd. He approached her after the talk, holding a copy of the book. "You did great," he said, offering a genuine smile. "This is exactly what people need right now." "Thanks," Emily replied, signing his copy. "But none of it would have happened without you. Your courage gave me the courage to dig deeper." They stood there for a moment, two people united by a shared mission. Though their paths had diverged in some ways, their goals remained aligned to inspire action and foster understanding. As the year drew to a close, Marcus reflected on the changes he'd witnessed. Airlines had implemented new policies to combat discrimination, and corporate leaders were beginning to prioritize equity in meaningful ways. Social media campaigns continued to highlight injustices, holding companies accountable for their actions. Progress was slow, but it was steady. During a quiet dinner at home, Marcus received a call from General Hayes. "We're seeing positive shifts," Hayes said. "Your efforts have made a real impact, not just in aviation but across industries. Keep going." Marcus thanked him, feeling a swell of pride. He knew there would always be setbacks and resistance, but he also knew the tide was turning. Later that night, as he stared out at the city skyline once more, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to face it head-on. With allies like Emily and countless others joining the fight, he believed true equality was within reach. In New York, Emily sat at her desk, drafting an outline for her next project. Her mind brimmed with ideas, fueled by the knowledge that her work mattered. Together, she and Marcus had ignited a spark, one that would continue to burn brightly for years to come. And so, as the world turned and seasons changed, their partnership endured, reminding everyone who followed their journey that change was possible. All it took was courage, persistence, and a willingness to stand up for what was right.